Okay. And hide non-video. Excellent. All right, so we're going to get started here in just a moment as everybody gets logged in.
Sunglasses.
I try to park in the shade.
True to form, we have someone in the field and someone in the office. It's kind of how home building works, right? We got to coordinate the field and the office.
Communication.
Exactly.
Isn't that what it's all about?
It is. It is. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here just real quick. But before we get started, I like to go over these little pieces before I do the official welcome. But before we begin, for those of you who are here with us live, we are recording this session. So you're welcome to come back and visit on our website, or you can listen to it on our podcast. We're on Audible, we're on Spotify, and we're on Apple. It's Be a Builder of Choice is the name of the podcast. You can listen to it again there or share with your friends and family. We do encourage you to ask questions, so please feel free to submit your questions throughout the program. You can either do that by clicking on the double speech bubble at the bottom of your screen with a Q&A underneath it, or you can have some conversation on the side as well through our chat function. If you have any questions that are directed specifically to me that are a little bit that you need some background help with Zoom, you can also message me privately. I'm happy to help you in the background if necessary. And of course, we always welcome your comments and suggestions. If you have other topics you'd like to see us bring up in the future, feel free to send those comments to me directly through the chat or email them to me. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get the webinar started. So welcome everyone to episode 5 of the Builder of Choice series, Designing a Beautiful Home with Your Customer's Budget in Mind. To become a builder of choice, you must establish yourself as a leader in your market by creating and fostering relationships with your employees, trade partners, and customers. Being organized and disciplined with your systems, processes, and procedures make you the builder everyone wants to work with. Leading your team to be a builder of choice sets you apart from your competition, giving you a competitive advantage. The Shinn Group, with the leadership of our founders, Chuck and Emma Shinn, are passionate about helping you become the builder of choice in your market by focusing on tried and true principles. If you want to continue your learning beyond today, we have several programs available for you. Join us in one of our several live seminars, such as Managing for Profit or the Superintendent's Job. You can visit our website, builderpartnerships.com or shinnconsulting.com for our current class schedule and other opportunities. The Builder of Choice series will continue to cover topics that help you become the builder and choice of your market. The next topic is buyer financing with Jim Weigel and Roland Narcy on December 1st. So keep your eyes out for registrations for that. They'll open up here probably in the next week or so. I'm Emma Jane, and I'm here today with our senior consultant, Ed Hauck, and our guest, Lita Dirks, CEO of Lita Dirks and Company. And both Ed and Lita have worked with builders to help price their product by reevaluating existing product or advising on new products. So today we're going to discuss what builders should be looking at right now to right price their homes to continue selling into 2024. So with that, Lita, let's kick off with you. And could you please share a little bit about yourself and why you're so passionate about being in this industry?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Emma Jane and Ed. And it's really a privilege to be able to be on this program. I think it's a wonderful series of programs that you are producing. And thank you for allowing me to share. Lita Dirks, my company is Lita Dirks and Company. We're an interior design firm. We're located in Denver, Colorado, but our client base is scattered all across the country. The sea to shining sea and border to border. So we have worked in, I think, every state in this wonderful union of ours. And why am I passionate about what I do? I think that I'm really passionate in bringing the message that interior design and interior merchandising is more than just furniture and colors. It really is truly about people, and those are the people we serve and the people that we're trying to bring into a home, and really to help try to allow people to understand that waiting too long to get the true professional merchandiser in to the system in developing your product is truly a miss, and truly a missed opportunity, because that's where everything starts. And the good, I call it the good bones of what we're all building, and that is the home. And if you hear me refer to the bones, it's because I truly believe that that's where it starts. And what we're trying to do is make our boss happy, and our boss truly is the buyer of the product.
Aw, thank you, Lita. And you've been a part of this industry for a long time. And I know Chuck and Emma have really enjoyed our partnership with you. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So we're in another fun part of this industry. Again, here we are again with another adventure in home building. The last 3 to 4 years have given us great opportunity to change and grow with all the world has thrown at us. Now we're faced with an affordability issue as a result of increased pricing, increased costs, and increase in interest rates. So I'm going to kick off with Ed real quick. What are some of the things you're seeing in the market today that the builders can focus on right now to help combat the issue and keep selling homes in 2024?
Well, you started out with what the effect of the interest rates are doing, and that's pretty much has cut our sales price by 20% or more to the buyers to keep their mortgage payment about the same. And that's hard to find. If you follow Chuck and Emma's principles, if your construction directs are 50%, you've got to find a lot of money to get that price down. 20% is a lot. And Lita, when we first started talking about this call a few weeks ago, mentioned that you got to have good bones. And there's a lot of, from Lita's perspective to mine, if I don't have good bones, if I don't have a good building envelope, we're spending tons of money and I'm leaving nothing for Lita in the end to give the buyers a reason to want to move. Right now, if we strip everything out, Lita will talk about this, they don't want to move because they're already in an apartment that's better than what you're offering. As you work with builders, there's a lot of things wrong. We didn't pay attention to the building envelope as we started. We've over designed. We got too much square footage. We've over engineered. A lot of mistakes getting that building envelope to market. And from my perspective, not stepping on Lita's toes, I have to have a good elevation. She talks about the ugly baby. And there's nothing worse than trying to sell an ugly baby. There's nothing worse when the nurse wants to smack your baby upside the head and not on their butt. But, you have to have a good elevation. And then the rest of the spaces are important. You've got to have good kitchen and public space. And the owner's primary suite has to be very good. And I see a lot of people who've either spent too much money or have a dated design. So my thing is I have to have a good building envelope to give Lita the good bones. She'll talk about the flex spaces and really what's important to buyers. And right now, as we're cutting, we've got to be very careful we don't create that butt ugly baby that you can't sell.
And Lita, I'd love to have your perspective on this as well. Like we said when we first started, we have the field perspective and we have the office perspective. So we've got both of you guys talking from two different sides of this process. So I really want to hear what your perspective is.
I agree with everything that Ed's talking about. Absolutely. And I do feel that it starts with the plans. And I think that's where it's so critical with what we're building. And I was thinking about this, each time we've talked, and I have another thought and an idea that, what is natural for what I do and how I see it, I tend to forget that other people may not be hearing what my thoughts are inside of my head. But like when you talk about over designing, I think that we tend to do that in this business. We go through these eras or these times when we're having to take out, we call it taking away from the product, and we're having to slim down because inflation is going out of control. And then all of a sudden we get going and we start designing and just what else can we put in and what else can we add? And one thought that I had when you said that just now, Ed, was that I think that sometimes we put a heck of a lot more space into some of these areas than we really need to. And when you think about where are we really putting the space, and like a great room can be a great room. And part of the words when I hear a great room to me is a room that can be flexible. It can work through many stages in that buyer's life, and in what's happening with them, and in what's happening in the universe. When COVID hit and all of a sudden everybody had to come back into their home, how flexible were some of our spaces? I saw a lot of dining rooms that really became offices, but saw bedrooms also becoming offices, and other rooms becoming schools. So we're looking for flexibility, and it's not just because of what when COVID happened, but it's also just in the way our lives are changing and the effect that the economy and the world has on us. Sometimes we want more space for dining and kitchen experiences, and other times it's more efficiencies that become important. But I see this great room sometimes, I think, being abused in the sense of putting more square footage in it than really makes sense. And that's where, like, a true merchandiser that understands space and understands what people are looking for, the idea is, can the furniture really fit in there that is necessary to that buyer? Or are you struggling with trying to get that furniture in there because there's too much space? I've seen many times when that area can be so big that you honestly are trying to figure out what other activities you can bring into that space. Now, is that really a value add to a person to try to struggle with how they're going to use a space? Or is it better, especially now, that we think if it is good, if it is well sized, then it should be accommodating things like food, entertainment, office, and all these different. It should be flexible, but it doesn't need to be overbuilt. So right away, when you begin to think about how can I massage my costs, and to the point of the Chuck and Emma Bible and how they have all taught us, I truly believe that a budget is there for a reason. And whether it's the builder's budget, which is super important because you have to understand what your budget is, you also have to understand the budget of the buyer too. They may have dreams that are far beyond their budget. That's not a problem. A good merchandiser can help create that feeling, but you've got to be honest about what their budget is and what your budget is, how much you really can put into this particular project that you're doing. Now, down the street or in the other neighborhood in 6 months, it may be a totally different budget that you're working with. But I think that the honesty and the communication, and then being able to right size some of these different spaces is a true beginning. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be rambling in another direction, but it just brings out the truth of how we need to work together. And I think that there are so many areas that we can work with to help control the sizing and the costs.
Absolutely. And I'm kind of going off script a little bit here today, but going off of that question and then looking from Ed's perspective, we're talking about, he's talked so many different times about looking at the plans and evaluating the efficiency of the plans. So Ed, thinking about what Lita just said, how, from your perspective, does that help reduce the cost, the initial cost of the house, so you can reduce the price to meet the needs, the buying power of your buyers?
So the first step we start pulling things out. We're trying to buy better. And one of the things that's happening now is we're starting to redesign to get the square footage down. In the last 5, 8, whatever years, our houses kind of just kept expanding. And to Lita's point, there's an appropriate size. But now if I'm going to take product that's 2,800 square feet and get that price down by 20%, I got to redesign. I go from 28 to say maybe 2,500 square feet. I got to be very careful that I'm using the appropriate size rooms. In some cases, I see builders with very poor bathroom designs. Maybe they put a lot of stuff into it, but it's not thought out. It's not good value. It's not really creating the space. To Lita's point on the two things I always worry about is the elevation, and that I call it the public space is the great room / kitchen. I'd be very careful not to cut too much out. So I really would rely on Lita to say, hey, I'm trying to cut this great room down. How much can I save? But if I'm going to go from 28 to 2,500 square feet, I got to cut. Okay. And that price point, depending on where you're at, there's different market segments. I've got the first time buyers, that's pretty much are in big trouble right now. But if you have move up buyers, I can make sure that I'm not cutting my space to the point they're no longer a move up. It's a trade. So I got to be very careful on cutting those spaces. So I rely on Lita big time on how I can create that great room that's nice. When we did our prep call, is I got to cut cost, but if I start cutting windows out, I've taken the value out of that family room, great room. So you just can be very careful on where you allocate the numbers and really how you start looking at the room sizes as I make them smaller.
Absolutely.
Hey Ed, let me chime in there because you talked about the windows, and this is for Lita also. I go into a lot of houses and they have the great room, but they have so many windows. I have no walls to hang anything. I can't hang memorable pictures. I can't do any art. I can't do anything because I've got so many windows in there. They could improve the look of the product by reducing maybe 50% of the windows that they put in those great rooms.
Well, to add to that, Chuck, is right now everybody's buying bigger and bigger TVs. And I see builders all the time that have not thought out logically about that space. And that's where I like to work with Lita to make sure that I've left enough room for that oversized TV and the windows and the furniture. So I think now more than ever, I got to worry about that.
Yeah, and I see no place for children's pictures, no place for anything in the way of art or pictures.
Chuck, I think that you're right on. It's like we go, and it's like we all go from one extreme to the other. The more windows we have, the better it is. Well, and sometimes, I've been in some of these models where what you see outside of a window is really not going to encourage me to want to buy. So yeah, it's like, which windows do we keep in and which ones don't we? And I agree. I think that TVs are getting bigger. And what we're going to be doing with TVs in the future, I have all kinds of ideas about that. But I think that the main thing is the part of the home that is the living part of the home. For any of those buyers, whether, and especially that middle buyer that's raising the family, or the 55 plus buyer, they need a lot of space for entertaining. When that first time buyer, they're so grateful and happy to be able to be in this space, that I think that through giving them adequate spaces with not a lot of bells and whistles, they're going to be bringing that in themselves. But these other buyers, they need to see something that they don't have in what they have today. And in some cases that might be windows, but what about the placement of windows? And how do we encourage more value to the interior space? I think can be in its relationship to outside, like windows that follow the length of the deck or the patio or whatever it is. If they can take advantage of the size of whatever that outdoor space is, then that truly can become an extended room for them. It's not just the inside space that's the great room, but now you have this great outdoor room also. So if you keep the windows to the size of what a nice patio would be, or deck, then they have an extended room right there that they can continue to add on to, whether it's by creating a beautiful outdoor space, whether it becomes a screened-in porch space, whether they add on in years to come because they need more room. But I think it becomes a flexible opportunity. And at that point, you're controlling the windows, but those windows should be as big as possible, but at looking at what might be that next part of their living space. And maybe some of these other side windows we can take out. Now, if you're on 5 acres of land, I mean, that you're talking about a whole different thing, but we're probably talking about a whole different buyer at that point. So,
Exactly.
so I think that way it helps find some of those interior walls. And another space that really bothers me is entries to some of these different houses where I feel the entries might be too big. They don't need to be that big, or they are made up of a lot of doorways, a lot of halls. So, yeah, it's a hard call, but here again, the communication and looking at your plans is really important. But the correct spacing takes these kind of conversations, and I think every site is going to be probably a little different.
Absolutely. Well, and I have a couple of questions that fit in right here that were sent in by Sarah. She first wants to know if you can elaborate on the quote unquote stupid mistakes or quote unquote dated plans, i.e. what are the big no-nos?
That's a long list.
I know.
So I was working with the builder recently. We're trying to simplify the plans. We hadn't got into the point of even reducing them. And then really like finding what's current is easy. Just look around. I mean, this bathroom for the owner suite was so dated. It had, and Lita mentioned another thing is coming into the openings and having lots of like breakups between room. All that's just adds material, adds cost. Just think about it. And by the way, it's hard to talk generically about product. I'll focus on a lot of the move up and multi levels of move up. Those markets people are still trying to squeeze into. They're finding what they think is the deal on the house because the house isn't rising. They got to afford the payment, but we're not giving them reason to move. So your designs have to be a whole lot more current. Kitchens, it's got to be adequate kitchen, but don't cut the kitchen down to the point where Emma Jane and I talked about this the other day. Is don't use wasted space. If I'm going to do an island, make sure it's a really nice island, but it's cost effective. Don't shinch out like Lita will talk about. If I cut too much, there's no reason for them to buy. So the dated designs, you really just got to go look in your market, and it's so easy. Look online. Go look at your competition. I could spend hours looking at other builders' product and start seeing things that are just good ideas. I mean, I used to have stacks and stacks of pictures of just nice designs. Could I take that and incorporate it into the price point that I'm working towards? And it's all about the appropriate price point, not just, I need $1 million detail and an affordable house. It just doesn't work.
Right. And Lita, I'm sure you have some ideas too.
I do. And I'm thinking, and here again, it really does depend on the buyer and where they are in their lives. And, and I think it's hard to say first time buyer, I think it's more of a family buyer, even rather than a move up buyer, but, and then that adult buyer, but there are many different things to do, especially that family buyer is at a point where what they really need is what I call they need help. They're screaming out for help because they probably need more space. They're frantic in their lives. They need more organization than they're finding in their own home. They need more space, more organization, more efficiencies. Many times both parents are working. And they need help. So like when Ed talks about that kitchen, yes, it's like they need a really good functioning kitchen. They ideally need an island. How big is the island? The island should fit the space, but it shouldn't be over exaggerated. And also it shouldn't be under exaggerated. I think that how you deck out the kitchen, that can be where you can start optioning some different packages or programs. But the most expensive parts on the inside for a buyer to have to pull out and redo would be like cabinetry, countertops, windows, flooring. So those are the big money item. The bathrooms, pulling a tub or whatever, those kinds of things, you've got to be really thoughtful to making sure that it's what that particular kind of buyer is looking for. And as an example, the backsplash, like we're seeing so many elaborate, amazing, fabulous backsplashes and some wonderful details in kitchens with shelving and whatever. And those are all really great. But depending on who the buyer is, especially if I think of that help buyer that has this family that's growing, they don't want those shelves in there. They're barely getting the dishwasher unloaded, let alone putting the dishes back into the cabinet. And they don't want to have to see anything on shelves. Your 55 plus buyer, maybe they don't mind it, but even them, they don't want to see something that they feel like has to be dusted. So with that backsplash, I often feel that why put it in? Why put it in, or put it in with a very simple material, with a very simple tile? There are wonderful tiles that have a nice simple shape and they're not costing a fortune. So either I would put in a very simple tile and let them replace it later, or I would just paint an accent color, do some lovely merchandising in there so it looks like a wonderful space, and let them add it. They can do it themselves later or hire somebody later. Same with flooring. It's like, do you really need to put the wood all over the main level and the second level? Maybe not. Maybe it's just in that great room, but all of the bedrooms are all carpeted. They can add to that hardwood surface later. It's a lot easier pulling up that carpet than pulling up wood that they don't like later, or so I think that it's not a matter of taking away some of the feelings of luxury or newness, but it's, where do we put it? Where do we put the stops? How do we handle the selections in the house? Are they all really at a really upper level? Or I think about a car. My parents, when they bought a car, it was a basic car they purchased, and then they would add on, I don't know what it was, the radio, the whatever, but they would add on to the car. And it's somewhat like that, because then the cars went to a good package, a beautiful package, and the deluxe package. And again, the efficiencies are there for the builder and the guys in the field, and the expense. And then the buyer, actually, in this day and age, has an easier time in making choice. They have these different, good, better, best, for whatever reason. And that's a way to be able to make choices quicker and keep costs controlled.
Did you have something, Ed? Yeah, but can I say something real quick, and then you can, Ed? I just want to say, the girls are taking over. But one thing that you mentioned, and we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and I really like how you're saying it, is thinking about the things that are hard for a buyer to change later or add on to. And you made several comments about it's hard to change the cabinet. So focusing on where you're spending the money to have good items in the house, and allowing the other things for them to kind of say, hey, this is where you can add on later. Go ahead.
And
go ahead.
all these, see, this is communication. This is wonderful because you come up with another idea. When we were talking about the windows in the beginning, and Chuck was saying, are there too many windows or whatever? The other mistake, and I've seen it over and over again, where a builder for the back door or for whatever it is, they either go to an exaggerated extent of making enormous decks and enormous patio statements, or they go the other direction and there's a block of concrete that's right out there, and that's the step out the back door. I think that you'd be better off with controlling the size of the window, making sure the window and some kind of patio, go ahead and lay enough concrete so that they can actually put something on it later. And that way you really are already putting it in place for them. And it's one of those things that even if the product itself gets smaller or you're inching things out, by giving them another opportunity for, who knows, another 200, 300, 400 square feet, that to me is still tremendous value to the house. And those windows can be the controlling line. These are, we have to be thoughtful to where their budget is right now, but we also have to be super thoughtful to what their dream is, because either they're needing or wanting to move, and we've got to help them with the reason why they should be making the move. These are things they don't have in their old house. That's the other thing. It's there's so many things that coming out of that old house that we can give them. And what is that? And I think every area of the country, you're going to find it a little bit different.
Absolutely. Did you have something, Ed? I didn't mean to cut you off.
The one thing I'd like to circle back on is everything that you guys just talked about is there's a decision process you have to make. I mean, Lita's got a lot of great ideas on the needs analysis in order to get people to want to move, but you really need your design team to sit down and start prioritizing. To Emma Jane's point, the backsplash is a perfect example. If I got to pull something out, I can pull that out. And by the way, I don't even put the granite backsplash in the little 3.5-inch piece. It cost a bloody fortune. But what Lita and Emma Jane said, you just have it ready for them to do things later. So all these are really product line specific on what can and can't be done. The hard part is, usually our biggest problem is the design team and ownership has to figure out where's the line. What can I can't put it all back in, because if I got to save 20%, something has to go. Mm-hmm. So the design team, the hard part is sitting down, going around the table with the entire team. Mm-hmm. You want to go back to the windows for a second. Was working with a builder, had a 7.0 by 7.0 window to capture the view. And by the way, to Lita's point, the view was of this neighbor's fence. By the way, that was a custom window, custom size, cost a bloody fortune, to install. And could we have found maybe other sizes, other more cost-effective choices? So with the purchasing teams in the room, you got to come to that table, and that was a $3,500 piece of glass, by the way. So the standard piece in that case was 3.0 by 7.0, three of them, about the same size, but that was $900, not a couple $1,000s. So you got to start looking at your parts and pieces, knowing the cost. As a team, by the way, that team's going to be crying by the end of this meeting because they're pulling stuff out that they really like and everybody wants. But what does the buyer need? Lita talked about that. What if I'm pulling things out was the memory point for a buyer to make them move? You got some hard decisions to make. What's coming out? More than likely, not only is the bones of your house really bad, every time I look at a plan review, there's just money everywhere. Every time I see these bad designs, don't you look at them ahead of time? Over-designed trusses. Every time you look up, you see a silver plate. That's $100 every single time. So start looking, and if I don't do a good job in the building envelope, I'm leaving no budget for Lita to make some choices with me, none whatsoever. So, whether it's the backsplash, whether it's the dated over spec bathroom, kitchen, bathroom cabinets you're picking the odd size that are more expensive. You got to look at every part and piece, figure out what's expensive, and start making the hard decisions. Because if you don't start pulling stuff out, and by the way, you have season's almost over. Okay, we only have a few more weeks left in the month. Then we're fighting Santa Claus. If you're not ready to go by mid-January and rolling out new prices, new house coming soon that's lower than your price now, you're not going to sell any homes. So you got some hard decisions to make, and you got to make them.
Mhm. Well, and one thing that you mentioned and Lita mentioned, and we're kind of going in different avenues here, but you mentioned designing the home from the very beginning and making sure that you have good bones and taking out the waste that's behind the scenes. But when you're putting together your product development team, especially when you're trying to do something quickly like this, where we don't have a whole lot of time, what does your product development team look like? And what is your role for purchasing, field, and having Lita participating in that?
So one of the things right now, working with a few builders right now, that their sales are like in the dumps. There's not a lot of traffic. There's no web hits. You got to go start looking at first, find where. By the way, if you're looking online to see where builders, where houses are transferring, builders lag between 6 months to 15 months later. So builder sales don't count. You got to really look at the current resale market. That's where people are actually buying homes. Once I know what that line is, where that is, my design team has to sit down, and the makeup of the team, obviously I need a leader in the room. I need some other people, decision makers. I need purchasing in the room. Probably like to have my director of sales, maybe director of marketing. I've got to have a very good understanding of where I'm going with my new product. How do I get more efficient? I want to do a super efficient building envelope. As Lita calls it, I need super efficient bones. If I have super efficient bones, I can start allocating money. So that way, Lita and the rest of the design team could have a budget to say, I want to spend money on this piece of glass. I want to spend money on this kitchen. But if I'm wasting money, by the way, Lita will tell you, I don't think in any one of her merchandising opportunities, she's ever said, that's the biggest, best parallel I've ever seen, and I'm going to market the crap out of it. Nobody ever says that. So, but if I don't do an efficient design, I haven't left anything for Lita to really grab the buyers and give them some memory points.
Ed, when you talk like that, I think that's so true. And it's sort of like, what's behind the walls? And right now, I mean, what is behind the walls is very important. We want a wonderful structure. We want a good structure. We want everything efficient. We want good hot water, when we want it, and air conditioning. So that is very important. But right now, when you think of the world the way it is, people need hope. They need positivity. They need to feel that there is a wonderful future out there. And that's where what they see has to help them feel that they have some dreams that are still relevant. And I don't care whether the dream is for a first-time buyer that has never had anything of their own and the world's the dream, or who it is along the way. And I don't care about how much money it is, whether it's somebody's truly struggling, they have dreams. And if it's somebody with tons of money, they can't spend it all in a lifetime, they have dreams. So everybody has a dream, and being conscious and concerned about helping them find it is important. And they're not going to look behind the wall as much as from their heart. Emotions are what's going to sell. And especially when you get into the tougher market, the emotions are there, because it's the fear of missing out. Like I'm here, I'm working like crazy. I've got these kids, I'm growing and moving, and I don't want my dreams to fail. When you're 55 plus and they're thinking, my gosh, I've worked myself to death half my life, and now I have this opportunity and I don't want to lose it. And the first time buyer, it's like, my God, give it to me. This is what I've seen and what I've heard, and I want it too. So we have to really look at it, and we have to be very conscious of it, and we have to remember to create dreams, because everybody is aspirational. And I also know that I have never met a builder that said, I want to build ugly, right? And that's the thing. I ever met a builder that wants to build ugly? No. And there's no buyer that wants to buy ugly. So number one, it would be a horrible thing to come out of this home that you were living in, when you were talking about, one of the biggest problems is people are moving into, homes that are, not new homes, how old they are can and cannot make a difference. But in a lot of places, that's our competition right now, is they're going to move into maybe a 20-year-old home, 40-year-old home, 60-year-old home. Those really don't have some of the things that we can give them in a new home. So, being able to look at it that way and recognize that we can give them some of the things they don't find in the current home. What doesn't the current home? Number one, we were talking about windows. May have windows, but it doesn't have the kind of windows that they're seeing on House and Pinterest and everything else. It's not seeing that dream window. It's not seeing the beautiful kitchen. It's not seeing a nice bathroom. Storage areas that are amazing. Laundry areas that are amazing. Some of these houses have no storage. I mean, there's just no storage at all. I did have a thought on storage one time, and I'm really not sure. This would be a question probably for Ed, but I've thought if you just did a bare bone storage, even a closets, and if your closets were smaller, like thinking especially the primary closets, we want them bigger, 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 which of course is wonderful. But when we're thinking about budgets, if we give them a nice size walk-in closet, but not an over-exaggerated one, would it make more sense for us to put nothing in it and work some deal to be able to have a closet system put in? I know closet system is more money, but that would be another way to add value while you're really scrunching size. But so I think that it's conversation here again, it's conversations and the communicating between all of the different partners in this amazing industry that we have, all of them seeing it from a different platform and working some of this out.
Yeah.
So Lita, on the storage, by the way, adequate storage is cheap space. It doesn't cost a lot. If I have to go make up for the fact that I cheated the space, now I got to do some expensive inserts to make the storage useful. It's easier to give bigger space. One of the things that I see a lot and see builders utilize a lot is good walk-in pantries. It's a lot cheaper than kitchens, by the way. Has lots of storage, so I can minimize the cabinet space, which is expensive. It's got granite, it's got electric, it's got all kinds of things. So I think you just got to be very aware of what you're spending. And when Emma Jane had the question on the team, I need all these creative people to get in the room, throw the ideas on the table. And by the way, all when you walk in the room, leave the feelings at the door, because you have to make some hard decisions. Somebody in purchasing is going to tell you that closet organizer is going to cost $1,500 when I should have made the closet a little bit bigger in the first place. The storage space, I always say, is efficient, inexpensive space. And when Lita talked before, when I sit down and start allocating, I like looking at percentage of room sizes when I'm doing the design, and how much can I really start paring them down. So I can look at it either in total square footage, but it's got to be adequate no matter what product line you're doing. If you're talking over 55, you're not going to talk them into over 55 if none of their stuff fits. If it's a move up buyer, they got no reason to move because you made the kitchen too small and the island's too big. And next, you've only got 39 inches to walk around, and they're walking into all the space. It's all about appropriate sizing. And I think the team's got to understand that appropriate sizing and the cost of all the parts, and really sit there and make the hard decisions. Reducing product is hard, and we got to about middle of January to make some decisions, and right before Christmas, start advertising coming soon at that new price and start driving traffic and make the first quarter.
Yeah. So
Ed, just a couple of comments, and it kind of ties you and Lita together. But one of the things that you've done is put a big window in the kitchen over top of the sink, which eliminated a couple of cabinets, but gave beautiful light into the kitchen. The other thing, I'm tying this into the kitchen. One other thing, I was just recently walking a job site. I needed to have roller skates to go around the kitchen. What happened to the old magic triangle in the kitchen? I mean, right now, the poor woman's going to have to take a nap after dinner because of all the walking that she's going to try to do on the magic triangle. It's so huge, no thought process. The other thing that another kitchen that I saw had a breakfast nook off of the side. In the breakfast nook, they had an atrium door that swung into the area of the breakfast nook and windows, but they had so many cabinets in the kitchen, I couldn't get a table into the breakfast nook because of the atrium door and all the cabinets. I could actually cut one whole bank of cabinets out and a bank on the island. So I have 2 wall cabinets, 2 base cabinets, and a cabinet in the island. Increase my breakfast nook, make the breakfast nook work, change the atrium door to a slider, and all of a sudden the whole thing works much better than what the builder is trying to sell. And so these are just things, because that's an expensive piece of the house. And can I make it really function well for whoever is buying the house, as opposed to them buying it because I put so much stuff into it and they can't use the space?
So Chuck, that all goes back to knowing the appropriate spacing, layouts, working with Lita and your design team. At some point for kitchens, I'm talking to cabinet manufacturers, looking for the value pieces. Chuck mentioned the kitchen window. I used to put an oversized kitchen window, which brought lots of glass in, lots of light. It was tall. It was cheap, by the way. It was way cheaper than adding the cabinets. So a lot of it is going back, knowing the appropriate sizing and spacing, and working with Lita and the team to, no matter what I'm doing, if I'm redesigning, if I'm reducing or changing my building envelope just to get more efficient. But if I don't know the cost of these things and actually make some of these hard decisions, I'm just going to, as Lita says, I'm going to design an inappropriate product that nobody's going to want to move to.
Yeah, I think that, so much you're mentioning sizing, and that is something that that we talk a lot about in our office too, when it comes to appropriate sizing, whether it's furniture or accessories or whatever, but the sizing of things, and talking about windows. And there are some things that we get so used to seeing that that we don't realize that maybe we don't need them. I think of some secondary bedrooms where there may be several windows, on two sides of the room, and with all of those windows, this is what we'll notice. There's no place for the bed, or there's no place for a dresser, or the dresser, you're going to see the back of the dresser on the outside looking in, because you have to stick the dresser in front of a window. Now, things like that, and I think the reason we're adding like all these windows is partly because it's the feeling of green, the feeling of biophilic, the feeling of the energy of good health. But you have to think about what we also need. You need some place to put a bed, unless you can float a bed in the middle of a room. We don't want something that big either, and that's not that's that efficient. But I've seen many times in the secondary bedroom, there's an extra window on a side wall that you could eliminate every single time, because if nothing more, it actually doesn't allow to really make the bed feel special, because it's an interruption of space. And if you're thinking of, I think of rooms and I think of walls really as painting, and I'm drawing a picture, I'm drawing something, that's, it's on a canvas, and that canvas is interrupted with that window. I'd say probably 90% of the time, that second little window, if you needed to cut the window, because honestly, we can show how that space can look really beautiful, and nobody will know that window was even missing. So, I think that there are little things like that scattered throughout the house that if we look at, I was in a model recently, and in a lower level, they were wanting to show all the activity that could happen in the lower level. But under the staircase, they opened up a chunk of wall. They didn't do it in a thoughtful way. They did it so that it almost looked like there should have been a closet there. So it's like, just thinking, cutting that drywall in and having to paint it and doing that. And then the merchandiser comes in and says, well, what do I do with this space? It really looks like it should have been a closet. So it would have been better to have just drywalled and not opened up any space behind that staircase. On the other hand, thoughtful thinking, working together as a team and talking about what's needed by the buyer. Maybe it could have been an active, interesting spot underneath the stairs. It was just the sizing was incorrect, or maybe it could have been an additional storage area. So, there's these different mistakes, and I think all of us that I know in this industry, I think are very thoughtful. And again, we're trying to build beautiful, we're trying to build functional, and flexible and wonderful spaces for the buyers. But the communication between us, I think, is the way you hear and learn from one another, and you can only build on something much, much better. I don't have all the answers. I'm sure Ed, would say that he doesn't have all the answers, Emma Jane, Chuck, but put in a room together where you're able to discuss these. I think that that's the way you find what so often you look at, like, boy, I really need that window in that room. No,
Right.
maybe you don't,
Well, and just to kind of, I want to ask this question too, because this is very related, but I've heard two statements. One where the builder's like, I've just stripped everything out and there's nothing special about it, that they've taken out to the bare bones of the options. There's no upgrades. There's no nothing. I'm taking everything out. And then you hear the other comment where I'm not taking anything out because I need it to look special. And I feel like there's a balance someplace in the middle. And it obviously depends on the buyer. You have your first time buyer, your move up buyer, your 55 plus, your luxury buyer. So each one of those buyers is going to have a different need for what's included and what's considered an upgrade. How would you recommend a builder to kind of go through that process to determine where is that point to where they aren't overdoing it, but they're not underdoing it either? What are some things that they need to think about or conversations they should have to help them find that fine line?
To me, a lot of that is starting with the brand of the builder. What is their general brand? Are they more of an affordable kind of builder anyway, that's really stuck in this economic catastrophe? And what they're trying to do is, so for that affordable builder, I think that they are going to think that they have to just go bare bones. Well, nobody's going to be attracted to bare bones. And that's going to be a very sad purchase. Nobody wants to make a sad purchase. So I think that, understanding where you are, and if it is that very affordable buyer, I think that recognizing how low you should go with pulling everything out. But I think you've got to also give the buyer the option to be able to add on. So therefore, to me, you should do a model home, and it should be done showing the options, because if you don't show how this wonderful box can become, then you're not going to drive any desire, let alone a need to move in there, because it's a sad purchase. People want a happy purchase, an emotional purchase. So you show them the options in the model. So that brings up, what is a model? A model is a tool. It's a selling tool to be used by the salespeople to help them show how life can be in this space. It's a tool to be used for sales and for marketing. It's not to sell furniture. One of the worst things I hear is when somebody says, oh, everybody loves the coffee table. And I think, oh, great, they love the coffee table. I don't like to hear that. I feel that we've done a bad job. I want to hear somebody say, oh my gosh, I couldn't get my husband up out of that sofa. I couldn't get him out of the sofa. He said, this is where I want to be, or this place, all I have to do is bring in the pictures of my family and set them around. This makes me feel at home. So you've got to be able to show them their life that they're going to be able to have. It's got to be a positive statement. So you have to really, more than any of the other, like that luxury buyer or any other buyer, that model is so important because that box is not going to sell. So you have to be able to show that these are some of the things that you can add in there. And at that point, they will probably find that somebody may stretch a little bit to get the cabinets that they would like, or maybe to get maybe a little bit of wood at the entry. In other words, they can start building that dream and they have a little bit of it. So I think that it's understanding where you are. And I do feel that there are places we can all take away. And to me, that doesn't, as me, as a merchandiser, and if the builder says we have to cut somewhere, not a problem. But we've got to be able to understand it up front, not when you're halfway through something, because we have to understand the parameters in order to really make it look like the dream that somebody's looking for. So, I mean, you can, when you talk about cutting things, and where you would or where you couldn't, depending on the buyer, depending on who the builder is and what their brand is, maybe you don't put an island in. Or what I'm not a real believer in when the island is beautiful. It's like the jewel in the middle of the space. It really is. But, if you do a waterfall edge, and Ed, you can tell me the exact dollars, but if you run a beautiful granite or a stone, whatever counter, and you drop it with beautiful waterfall edges, those waterfall edges have just doubled and tripled the cost of that entire island. And then you feel so sad walking out of that model thinking, no, I can't afford that. That doesn't make me happy. Oh, Harry, I don't really feel good. Well, show the model with the beautiful island and show the beautiful counter, but don't add that kind of an extra that's really going to not help somebody feel good about making that emotional purchase.
That's a great point, because I feel like sometimes you walk into models and they do put all these fancy things in most people can't afford. It's like, well, that's great, but I can't afford that.
Like tile, just thinking of tile, and when we were talking about the backsplash, and I do think that being able to merchandise the home and showing what the backsplash can look like and letting them see it, but not using some Ann Sachs kind of a tile that they can't afford, you can design beautiful. It's in the choices. It's the choices that you're making, but maybe you're not running the tile also floor to ceiling in the bar area. You've got to control the costs of where you're putting these wonderful materials, but you want to use some of them because that's able to create excitement. The other area I think of is lighting. And I think rather than killing yourself as a builder trying to produce a lighting package or whatever, maybe just making sure they have good lighting, the good recess lighting, in the places that they need it, and then they can add on fancy fixtures later. Or what they can do is you can show in your model a few areas with just some wonderful luxury light fixtures.
Hey, Lita, if I overdo my models, should
Yes.
I call it an idea home as opposed to a model?
Oh my gosh. Yes.
I see it a big
Absolutely. Yes.
when I overdo the models. I have seen people actually walk out saying, I can't afford this neighborhood because of what I put into the model.
You've scared them to death. Exactly. This is not the time for a trend model.
Right. Normally, what I look at is if my consumer is going to spend $40,000 on the design center, I need to be somewhere. Maybe I can go to 50, maybe 60, but I got to be in the range where they think they can afford what I put into that house in the model.
I agree. And, I think that there's a lot you can do as a merchandiser and thinking about a model when with paint, and what you can do with paint is sometimes you just can create magic. So, and paint is pretty affordable, much more than expensive tiles and everything else.
Right.
Well, we are at the top of the hour, so I do want to start closing down. So Lita, thank you so much. Can you give us your final thoughts on what is the one thing you hope each of our builders that's joined us today or on our podcast, what's the one thing you want them to take away and they can implement right away?
I think is optimism. And I think the idea is the opportunity right now is, I think it's such a high level. I think the idea that we really can be creative and thoughtful, and I think it's a very exciting time to be able to think about where the world can go. And I think being flexible and optimistic is high on my thoughts and my wishes for everybody out there.
Yes, yes. And I hope that each of you have gotten something today, a little nugget that you can take back with you and start implementing and getting, making those changes you need to make, if you need to make some before the new year. So I want to thank you all for joining us for Webinar Wednesday. Please come back and visit us. We have our webinar on December 1st with Jim Weigel and Roland Narcy about buyer financing. So we're going to do some talking about that. So we've talked about how to make your house affordable, and now we're going to talk about how to help your buyers buy. Then we'll have another webinar on December 6th with Maverick, Be Proactive, How to Protect Your Assets and Avoid Litigations. And then on December 13th, we have our last webinar of the year with a conversation with ECI. So we look forward to seeing you again. Please give us a call or contact us if you have any other questions or want to learn more of the topics that we talked about today, if you need to get in touch with Lita or Ed. But thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody. And we look forward to seeing you on December 1st. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, Lita.
Thank you.